I'm just gonna invite people. Welcome, welcome. Thank you everyone for joining us to this exciting and insightful XR chat. We're gonna talk about extended reality here. We are thrilled that you're stopping by as we explore this cutting edge world of extended reality with some of the brightest minds in the industry here. I'm not saying that lightly. For today's panel, I will serve as your moderator. My name is Roberto Haza. I am the president of the VR/AR Association. We're so happy to be here. I'm also an XR and spatial computing consultant. For over 20 years, I led global marketing campaigns for brands like Sony Electronics, T-Mobile, Barbie, and Hot Wheels. And the pandemic led me to embrace XR for its immersive heads-up, hands-free communication style. Now, I believe that's the future of communication, the way we're going to use digital in the future. And I feel fortunate to guide us all through this chat that we have today. Before we dive into our discussion with our expert panelists, I want to introduce and briefly touch on the key technologies that we're going to be talking about. The first one is going to be virtual reality. Virtual reality, as you can see here, a lot of us know them from video games. We can see came from simulators. Roblox made a big splash of it. But it's not just in video games. A lot of the constituents here have been using it to create 3D models for buildings, and I think it's getting feedback from the speakers. And the spaces before they are built, like the examples that we see right here for virtual reality, right? And they can be seen in headsets as well as in 2D tablets, computer screens, manipulating the 3D spaces. Now, when we move into augmented reality, it starts getting more fun because the technology starts interacting with the real space that we're using, right? So there's digital information that overlays into the real world, and we have mobile AR filters. A lot of what Snap has been doing has become very famous with the funny faces, and you see plenty of examples here. And then the one that I love is mixed reality. Mixed reality is a combination of both and combines both with the virtual objects that are digital, and then you can manipulate in your real space to make it have presence in the space. Now, all of that combined is what we call extended reality, and how I introduce myself as the consultant of extended reality, right? 3 different technologies that interact to create the extended reality space. So to take us today through our chat, we have 3 experts. I'm going to introduce first Todd. Todd Little is the lead UX design engineer for Fairworlds. Todd is a proud graduate of the University of Washington and the Human Center Design and Engineering program. Has been at the forefront of developing XR experiences for over 7 years, among many other development before that. He will be sharing some of his most innovative projects with us today, and Todd's expertise is in user experience design, brought new dimensions to the way that we interact with technology. So he's a virtual contributor to the XR space. Thank you for being here today with us, Todd.
Excited.
Next, we are honored to have Yolanda Barton with us. He's an immersive storyteller and the founder of Revere XR. Yolanda is a passionate inclusion architect and holds dual master degrees in digital media communication and communication, communities and networks, also from UW. Through Revere XR, Yolanda amplifies and preserves community voices and stories. She brings them to life in ways that resonate deeply with audiences. Hopefully you will get to see a little piece of this today. And her commitment to using XR as a tool for social impact makes her a pivotal voice in today's discussion. Thank you for being here with us, Yolanda. And finally, I'm delighted to introduce Julia Biabout, the creative director and CEO of Novabyte Studios, and my program's chair and great contributor for the VR/AR Association.
Yes.
Julia is an expert and thought leader in AR placemaking and collective memory practice. Her work has taken her to the forefront of discussions at prestigious venues like the MIT Media Lab, the Augmented World Expo, or AWE, and the US State Department. Julia's academic background includes a degree in architectural engineering from Penn State University and master's in Asian studies from Florida International University, where she focused in collective memory theory and practice. She is also a registered professional engineer and a US State Department critical language scholar, fluent in Chinese. We are incredibly fortunate to have Julia with us today. So with this panel of experts, I want to get started in today's discussion And the first question, I'm going to kick it off to you, Todd.
Okay.
Could you share with us some of the XR experiences you have created and the purpose behind them?
Definitely. Hello, everybody. So we're going to walk through some slides that we put together. So I work at Fair Worlds, and one of the things that we did during our pandemic times was, what could we do outside? Well, go on walks. And so we came up with this IP as our first IP called Spacetime Adventure Tours. So I'm excited to kind of walk you guys through that. Let's go on to the next slide here. So yeah, we were kind of appealing this retro futuristic look. And since we're based in Seattle, it became obvious that the Seattle Center was going to be our test bed for this. So it's an AR walking tour that combines the history, but also comedy and having fun, engaging experiences. Let's go on to the next experience here. So yeah, we put a lot of effort into going through and doing a lot of research and looking at video, imagery. And so you're almost kind of getting a documentary in itself in this walking tour. So in this slide, it's a little hard to see, but there's a lot of imagery from that 1962 World's Fair. And that's a really fun part of the process is just diving into that research. So let's go on to the next slide here. So this shows an image of kind of a representation of what the experience is like. So it's an iOS, Android app. And as you're walking around, you have this thing called the walkie-talkie time machine. So your phone turns into this like time traveling device. And on the top of the screen is where the video content is showing. And then on the bottom is a little map. And that device changes depending on where you are. Let's go on to the next slide here. So this shows the route, and it changed over time, and we can maybe get into that a little bit later of how that evolution of placemaking happens when you're doing tour design. Sort of a spoiler alert is finding a destination that's sort of a way to debrief the whole experience. And that turned out to be sort of the KXP gathering space for us. It originally was the International Fountain, but we wanted to have a place for folks to eat and to drink and sort of rest. And so that became a natural spot. I mean, gathering space is a great name for that kind of debrief. Mm-hmm. Let's go on to the next slide here. So yeah, the purpose, like I mentioned, was it was our pandemic project, but it's also getting people out and walking. You know, so much of us are sitting at our computers all day. This is an opportunity for folks to kind of re-engage with the city and explore it in a different way. Let's go on to the next slide here. So the technologies that power Spacetime Adventure Tour we're using the Niantic Lightship platform, and it's called Niantic Lightship. And some of the cool things, some of the cool things that we're using are, you're probably familiar with GPS, which is the Global Positioning System. But there's another technology called VPS, which is the Visual Positioning System. And it basically, GPS can give you accurate placement of virtual content at maybe 30 feet accuracy. Like it can vary 30 feet. But the claim is that VPS can be as accurate as centimeter accuracy. So for example, we could place a globe at the top of the Space Needle or have fireworks come out of the Space Needle. So that's one of the technologies we're using. And the other ones that we're using are spatial audio. We'll get into this here in a second, but our audio designer is blind. And so accessibility and sound design are big pillars of our experience. Let's go on to the next slide here. Yeah, so those pillars are animating the past, the present, and the future, delighting players with surprises, keeping it fun and engaging, and also trying to reduce that access barriers. So let's go on to the next slide here. Yeah, so I mentioned Andy Slater. He's our sound designer. He came onto the project right at the beginning, and he's been a great advocate as a blind individual of what makes the barriers are in our experience. So, for example, it became very clear that he wasn't going to be able to navigate without some sort of spatial audio solution that could tell him relatively where he needs to walk while going through the experience. Yeah, let's go on to the next slide there. Yeah, so that's it for me, and I'll pass it off to Yolanda.
Yep. It's going to be the same question to Yolanda.
Yeah.
What experiences have you developed that you can tell us about and the purpose behind them?
Hi, everyone. Really excited to be back in Seattle. Been here for less than 24 hours and really excited to join you guys. At Revere XR, we've created a couple of experiences, but all of them are really centered and focused on community storytelling. So this first one, you know, Seattle's changing. It's a new city. I'm born and raised here, and a lot of people don't know about the genius, the musical genius, the amazing talent that comes from this city. And a lot of people are living next to Jimi Hendrix's house and don't know it. And I think that's something that we should be celebrating in this city. So we recreated the central area, which is my old neighborhood, in virtual reality, so you can explore it and you can learn the history and you can walk around and you can have elders give you a tour. And you can also learn about Jimi Hendrix and a lot of the other amazing artists and musicians that were birthed and kicked off their career in this city, because there's a lot of them. And so you get that chance to sort of be teleported back into time. And that was the purpose, was to be able to say, the city's not going to stay the same, but the history is worth preserving. So let's create VR opportunities that really preserve the soul of our city and what used to be the identity. And even though we're changing, we should still be able to celebrate the legacies that came from this city. So that's the virtual reality experiences. And then this is an example. We also preserved some historic businesses in the Central District, businesses that have been there for a very long time, and their story and their business is very much connected to the community as well. So we wanted to kind of show some of those historic businesses. And now in virtual reality, you can open the door and walk in that business, and here, you can come check it out later. You can open the door and walk into that business, and you can hear the business owner tell the story of who they are. And most of it is people who've inherited businesses from their grandparents, and they're continuing the family business. And so we wanted to create a marketplace. Interestingly enough, my 13-year-old daughter designed this part of our VR experience, because my grandmother was the first African-American woman to own a beauty salon in Seattle. And my daughter wanted to make sure businesses got a chance to tell their story as well. This is another flyby. If any of you just go 15 minutes, I think that way, you will see this on 23rd and Union. And so this was a part of us also saying, this isn't historically what it looked like, but these are murals and art that really preserve the history of that neighborhood in the city, and they belong in the experience. So it's really perfect for this event, because it's bridging the past, it's preserving the past, but also incorporating what is current. So we're preserving the past into the future and celebrating what is. And that's all about looking to the past and preparing for the future together. And we want our VR experiences to really bring people together, to create community, to celebrate storytelling, and preserve what we're about to lose if we don't take the time to collect those stories. I see some head nods, so I'm glad you guys agree. Here's an example of how we used AI in VR. Really cool company, NVIDIA, gave us a chance to demo this at their GTC conference. That's Renee right there. And we got to do this on stage at the GTC conference. It was really amazing to be able to take the opportunity to bring Jimmy.
Well, I'm just a humble musician, man. They call me Jimmy. I've been playing guitar and singing for as long as I can remember. Music is my whole world, you know? It's the way I express myself, connect with people, and create something beautiful.
Hi, Jimmy. It's nice to meet you. How are you today?
Hey there, my friend. It's a wild ride being here, you know? Seeing all these folks gathered to honor my music, it's something else. But to be honest, it's also a bit overwhelming. I never thought I'd see the day when they could bring me back like this as a virtual being. It's mind-bending, really. But hey, I'm grateful for the opportunity to share my music and insights with all these wonderful folks.
That's what we want to see in history in this city, and we want to simulate it all over the city, whether it's in virtual reality or augmented reality. Let's engage with history and celebrate our past, because it'll really bring us together.
Yeah,
Back to you. Okay.
yeah, thank you, Yolanda. So two great stories here: a tour around the Seattle Center, and a tour around the Central District. So, Julia, what do you have for us on?
So I'm going to take y'all downtown, downtown. So this is actually an experience that we created for the 2019 Seattle Design Festival. I'll show you at the end a more recent one, but this is really kind of the first one where we went out and experimented right on our block. And I'm seeing this is, sorry, you can't really kind of see the whole thing, but we created a block scale experience on 3rd Avenue between Pike and Pine, and between 3rd on Pine and Pike between 2nd and 3rd, so which is a block many of us are familiar with today. But what a lot of people don't realize, and full disclosure, I live and work on 3rd Avenue between Pike and Pine. So this was a group of us coming together to really kind of test some of these augmented reality placemaking ideas that our team has a background in. Where I always say we're placemakers first, collective memory practitioners first, augmented reality is our medium. But you can see it was a block scale experience all the way around the block. We really kind of came together to see what augmented reality could do for the community, given the many changes and challenges we were having on the block at the time, and many that we still are. And so we set out kind of 3 design goals based on the challenges that we were seeing and experiencing on the block. First of all, was design for meaning. What we realized is that a lot of people, most Seattleites actually don't realize this is one of the most historic blocks in Seattle. The building you see right here was kind of the Carnegie Hall of Seattle. It had woodwork blocks back in 1915, before those were a thing, right? For the performing artists that were working in the emerging surrounding performing arts venues. And it also had a performance hall on the top and all that. So it has since been converted into condos by, that was done in the 1970s by Ralph Anderson, who some of you might be familiar with, one of the pioneering architects, that's pun intended, of saving Pioneer Square and starting the historic movement in that area, which ultimately led to the historic movement around Pike Place Market as well. So he lived in this building and converted it as well. And what we wanted to do here, you can see some of the historic photographs, is elevate some of the historic buildings as well as instances, events that occurred on the block. So this was, we don't know exactly on this, but we recreated using visual positioning system, this American celebration. We actually think it was probably at the end of World War II. I don't know how well you can see it. And next door to this building was the Winter Garden Theater, which was actually one of the first dedicated movie theaters in Seattle that was built as a movie theater. And so all of these murals, AR murals, are interactive. And so as you tap on them, you'll hear the historical stories told, written and told by the community. Again, it's a little bit hard to see here. We also have some 3D elements, so we recreated the famous marquee in the Winter Garden Theater that actually you can walk around in real space. So this was kind of our attempt to bring collective memory theory and kind of some of this community building around that storytelling. The next thing we did was intentionally design for community. So one of the things that we've noticed around this block is that it's very disconnected from the surrounding communities. Most people don't associate it with Pike Place Market. It's just kind of this island. And so we wanted to reconnect and reintegrate it with the surrounding community. And so we made sure we told stories that were relevant to people on the block as well as the surrounding community. We did that. This is one example of that. We also held a launch event. So back then, Seattle Design Festival kind of moved around to different neighborhoods. And so we were one of the neighborhoods that year. And so we created a launch event where we created opportunity for locals as well as festival goers to engage with folks on the street and help guide them through the experience, as well as during the process, making sure we're using that to the process itself to build community. So that's one of the key tenets of placemaking. and then also giving the community time during that day to experience kind of playful engagement both with the AR and in the real world. And then one of the big challenges has been a challenge to me is the design for engagement. So at that time, there was a very controversial skyscraper scheduled to go up in the neighborhood, which was some felt was very incongruent with the historicity of the block. But there was a lot of confusion around kind of what the scale and scope of this was. And so as part of the experience, we visualized the skyscraper in AR so people could get a sense. This is not architecturally what it would look like, since that would be protected by copyright laws, but at least gave them a sense of the scale and scope of the building. And then we asked people to engage and draw pictures of what they would like to see the future of Seattle look like. So these were all kind of things that were the community was wrestling with, and yeah. And so one of the we gathered some data, both survey-wise and qualitative data during it. This was the group of volunteers that actually worked on this project. I don't know if the scientists here, but there he is. There's one right there. So we became friends actually through that experience. And so you can see them actually in the Winter Garden Theater experience stop on the tour. But one of the things we noticed is that people really didn't conceive and still don't conceive of this block and the core downtown of Seattle as a neighborhood, and it absolutely is. There's we've estimated about 10,000 residents that live in this area, owners and renters. And this was my favorite quote, is we felt like we accomplished our goals. It's like, I didn't realize this was an actual neighborhood. So that was really exciting. But we generally about 94% of people said this was a great way to engage and learn about the new neighborhood. So we learned a lot about how to create experiences on location-based through this. And then we carried those through to a project called the AIDS Memorial Pathway, which is up in Capitol Hill. It sits on top of the Capitol Hill rail station. Highly recommend you go there. It is a destination public art community engagement project, poster child for community engaged creative placemaking. Whether you do the AR or not, it's worth a trip. We have somebody from the app here in our audience, which is great too. And we incorporate a lot of the lessons learned through that into this project.
Thank you, Julia. I think we have now, before going to that slide, there was a lot to unpack here, a lot of experiences that are actually hidden in plain sight. All you need, guys, is your phone, show up in these locations that our panelists mentioned, and look for it in the app and QR codes around the area, right? And you will have access to all of this, that it's mostly AR, other than the VR, especially for the Central District. But what you spoke a lot about what led you to design this kind of experience, but how did you get started with AR, and why did you start designing in XR? Let's start with Todd.
Hey, so yeah, I guess going way back. So I come from the UW Human Centered Design and Engineering program, And one of the things at that time, 2016, that was when a lot of the VR headsets were really like the HTC Vive was coming out, and so a lot of my design thinking was focused around that that area. And one of the things I wanted to explore was sort of the tools that were out there. So you've probably heard of game engines like Unity, Unreal, but there's also this design thinking of like there's a program called Tilt Brush, and that was a really common art tool at the time, and it was a way to do basically drawing in 3D space, and it blows people's minds today. Like it's still a really remarkable piece of tool, and that got me really excited of seeing bringing these kind of artsy tools to folks in a 3D space. And I got connected through a hackathon, and I got into Fair Worlds through that hackathon. It's another full story. But yeah, hackathons are awesome if you get a chance. And through our first 3 or 4 years, it was all focused on VR, and then COVID happened, right? And so now a lot of our focus has been on augmented reality, so that you don't have to put on a headset, you don't have to worry about COVID as much. And we're currently working on a Central Park version of the app. And so that's been an extra layer of challenge, because we're not based in New York, of how can we do this, how can we explore making a path remotely and making a walking tour that way. So yeah, hopefully that explains a little bit of at least my journey of that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yolanda, can we have the third microphone work for us? Yeah, it's a little stuck. Yeah. Yep. This one works. Yeah.
How about now? Okay,
Perfect.
I heard it then too. So you're asking how we got
How
started?
you got started in XR? Yeah.
I don't traditionally come from tech, so my pathway was definitely a little unique. I went back to graduate school and was just really interested in the future of storytelling and how that was going to be shaped by the future. And simultaneously, I also was returning to Seattle, to my neighborhood, and seeing that it had been completely erased. And so my concern was more urgent around, wait a minute, what's going to happen to the history and what's going to happen to the elders if we don't kind of collect it and preserve it for future generations. So mine was really more of trying to create a solution for my community. And then I saw that that hadn't really happened in that way yet. So I used my grad school trajectory to interview tons of elders, to learn more about virtual reality and augmented reality, to learn how we can use that technology and harness the power of it by recreating spaces that we no longer have access to. And that was sort of what was important to me. And then I wanted to test myself, so I applied to Oculus Launchpad, which was where I got to build a team and actually create something. So we moved from the theory of the concept of preserving history and celebrating community stories to actually creating the application. And that was great. It was an amazing experience. I built an awesome team, and they're all in this city. They're not here with us today. But they were all very dedicated to trying to collect the stories as well. And then we actually won the most recent winners with our virtual reality experience. And from then it just kind of took off, right? Now, how do we go to other cities and preserve their stories? How do we continue to preserve Seattle's history, first and foremost? Because as my two co-presenters will also share is, I mean, there's more than the Central District in Seattle's history. There is downtown. That's a neighborhood that needs to be preserved. There is the history of the Seattle Center, but there are also a ton more stories in Rainier Valley and the Native American history. So Seattle has layers and layers of communities and stories that need to be preserved. I feel like this should be a call to action for our city. While we're building and reshaping what it looks like daily, like, it's beautiful. Look around. We're privileged to have this in our backyard, but what it took to get us here is a lot of amazing journeys and stories that shaped the city, and we deserve the opportunity to preserve that. So it was a little bit different. I'm not traditionally from tech, but I'm here. It's my version of tech, and I look forward to building more of this with you guys.
Thank you, Yolanda. And finally, Julia.
Okay.
You also
Can you hear me?
didn't
Yeah.
come from tech, precisely.
Well, I came from engineering, architectural engineering. So I would say there's kind of my journey to XR, augmented reality in particular, is kind of a conflux of 3 streams in my life. So, but one of the things I'm just going to say I love about XR is it attracts people from so many different backgrounds, which makes it a really exciting, interesting, and diverse field and place to be. So one of the things I love is, like, on a daily basis, we work with people all around the world because the talent is so distributed around the globe. So that's really exciting for me. But for me personally, like I said, in my previous life, I was an architectural engineer for 25 years. So building design and construction. A subset of that is building simulation, and that was what I specialized in. And so we've been working in spatial computing for decades, what is now called spatial computing for decades, and building controls, which is basically an app for your building. And so I kind of had and very multidisciplinary teams. So that was kind of my one path. When I first kind of found my way to AR, I thought, oh, I'm sure there'll be some similarities, and I'm like, oh my gosh, it's exactly the same. Like all the problems are still the same that we have in AR in AE. So anyway, and then kind of the second stream was midlife. I went back to school to get a degree in Asian studies, which might not sound relevant at all, but it's so interesting how your life can take different turns that you don't expect. And so I specialized within collective memory theory within that. And that really studies how humans use the past and the present to negotiate their future. And also placemaking is something I've been doing for about 10 years, which studies how we conceptualize the spaces and transform those into places, which are spaces that have meaning. So kind of the anthropology and sociology of place. And then finally, kind of the tipping point was I met my current business partners, and they happened to be studying 3D modeling, getting their MFAs in 3D animation, game design, all of that. And so that was kind of the beginning. That was about 2016 or something like that. Yeah. So
Great. Thank you for sharing all these stories with us, for showing you part of the work. I want to open a question for audience. If any of you have questions, we have a few minutes. Yeah. Can we pass the microphone? Thank you.
I'm not sure that one's working. Questions?
Yeah, if you want to stand, and I don't think the microphone can get all the way back there, so don't be shy, don't be shy. Nobody bites here.
I'm just curious, when you're creating like a local AR or mixed reality experience, how much of the work goes into, I guess, getting support from like the local business owners or community leaders and actually getting them to convert or get their regular audience to download and use your app?
Do you want me to? I can. Oh, do you want to do it, Todd? Okay. So you have hit the nail on the head. What I say to all of the folks that we work with, our clients, customers, as well as our partners, we can pretty much do anything in AR right now. Like the creativity, the technical aspect of it is no longer the limitation. That wasn't true even 2 and 3 years ago. The challenge is user discovery and user engagement. And so that still is a nut everybody is trying to crack. It is the biggest challenge right now. The most common way is to have QR codes in certain places, but we've all learned to tune those out at this point post-COVID. So a couple other just wrinkles to what the really great point you're bringing up is technically nobody owns digital space right now. There are efforts to change that. So you don't technically need permission to, say, put an AR object on a building or in somebody's space. And I think depending on what your content is and what you're doing, that's totally fine. Like if you're an artist and you're making a pure artist and you're making a statement, that's kind of okay. It's like graffiti, right? However, if you're kind of doing this kind of work where you are telling stories that are sacred to the identity of the place and the people that occupy that space, personally, I would not do something without engaging with the folks. I think all of these folks are the same. And then being intentional and purposeful about engaging businesses and other connection points that help with that user. One, to involve them in the process and help build that community, but also to create those user discovery and engagement points. So I will let you guys add on to that.
Yeah, no, I think I agree 100%. And I think for the Seattle Center experience, I think most of us know this, but yeah, the Space Needle is privately owned. And so getting permission of using their imagery, it's a negotiation with all of the Seattle Center Foundation was a big supporter of ours. But yeah, I think you need to engage with the community to make sure that what you're showing is, appropriate for everybody. And yeah, the engagement issue of like, how do you get folks to download is a very big issue, especially for the platforms. Usually are when you get into video content and 3D model content, you're getting into gigabytes or large sizes. And how do you encourage folks to download that, especially on site? That's something that is still, I know folks are figuring out how can we store these things on the cloud and make sure that it's just being downloaded. But yeah, that's an ongoing issue for the industry of like how do we get that content streamed to the user? Yeah.
Sure. I'll just kind of take it a step further and say we live in like really unique time right now, right? And I don't know that all of the cities, schools, and programs are really ready to kind of jump and use the quality of the technology that we're using. So what we focused on mostly is how do we kind of engage people and just introduce them to this through our work, right? Because a lot of it is engagement, and there's so much that's still being shaped about this industry. So there isn't a lot of regulation. That's a unique time and space to be in, and that can pose challenges and be awesome at the same time. And we feel like the time is right and perfect and ripe for right now, but we need the support from more organizations, from more city departments, and people who want to see this technology flourish and interact with individuals, because that's where the power of it's going to come from, is humanity interacting with this technology. So it's one thing to make it, it's another to get people to engage in it. I think every time we do a demo, 95% of the people that come, it's still their first time trying virtual reality, or they're still trying to figure out what augmented reality is. And people have a lot of concerns about what AI is. Is it going to take over the economy and take people's jobs? So there's so much tension around technology right now that it's really great to just see positive uses of it to get people excited about using it in their daily lives. But it is going to be some time before there's more regulation, and it's going to be interesting to see where that goes.
Thank you, Yolanda. Anybody else wants to ask a question? One, going twice. Okay. So I just final notes. I want to give a kind of applause to our panelists today. Thank you so much, guys, for sharing your expertise and knowledge on this. Thank you all for stopping by. If you want to be involved and starting to get a hold of how does this get created, we're going to have an AR creation station just back here. We're going to set up a kiosk. You're going to see a big blue tarp. We're going to set up a station with a few laptops. Come and give it a shot. Nothing's gonna bite you, and our experts will guide you through how to create your first AR experience that you can see out on the web or into your own phones. So thank you again for joining.
Thank you, everybody.